The energy inside the studio of The View was buzzing even before the cameras switched on. Audience members fanned themselves with program cards, chatting excitedly, craning their necks for glimpses of the hosts as they settled into their chairs. Joy Behar was already in rare form, arms crossed, one eyebrow cocked, cracking jokes with the crew and getting big laughs. But beneath the humor, there was an unmistakable spark in her eyes. She was charged up, the kind of charged up that made the rest of the table brace for unexpected turbulence. The music swelled, the theme played, the applause sign flashed, and the hosts walked out to their usual roaring welcome. Joy waved, but it was a wave that carried the sharp edge of someone who felt bold, opinionated, and ready to stir the pot. She took her seat at the center of the desk, smoothed her papers, and flashed a grin that was a little too mischievous. The first segment went smoothly, politics, pop culture, a few jokes here and there, until it was time for the guest. And now, the co-host announced brightly, "Please welcome the incredibly talented, wonderfully hilarious Leanne Morgan." The audience erupted. People stood, clapping, cheering for the Southern comedy icon whose charm could warm a room faster than sunlight through a window. Leanne walked out waving both hands, her blonde curls bouncing, her smile wide and warm. "Well hey, y'all," she said as she took her seat. "What a sweet crowd. I haven't heard applause like that since my eldest finally moved out." The room filled with laughter, big, genuine laughter. Leanne's humor was wholesome but sharp, and the crowd adored her. Even Joy cracked up for a moment, leaning back as she chuckled. Leanne settled comfortably into her chair. "I'm so happy to be here with you ladies. I put on my best Spanx for this occasion." Again, laughter rippled across the room. Everything was light, easy, friendly. But then the shift began. Joy straightened in her chair and tapped her cue cards on the table, a subtle signal that she had something more pointed on her mind. The other host sensed it immediately. Anyone who had worked with Joy long enough recognized the look she got when she was about to push a guest, sometimes for the sake of dialogue, sometimes for the sake of drama. "So, Leanne," Joy began, her tone casual but her eyes sharp, "you've become this big comedy star talking about marriage and motherhood and casseroles and all that domestic stuff. Does it ever feel like you're, I don't know, playing into stereotypes?" The laughter died. A hush swept through the studio like a sudden breeze. The co-host sitting next to Joy subtly widened her eyes. "Oh no." Leanne laughed softly, still polite, still calm. "Well, Joy, I just talk about my life. That's where all the funny things happen. People relate to it." Joy nodded, unimpressed. "Sure, but it's also safe. You don't ever think about stepping out of the sweet Southern mom box you're in." The audience murmured. A few heads snapped in Joy's direction, surprised by the jaggedness of her question. Leanne's smile stayed steady, but her posture shifted slightly, like someone bracing against a cold gust. "I talk about what's real to me. My family, my childhood, my journey. I think people can feel authenticity from a mile away." Joy leaned in. "But don't you think there's something limiting about sticking to the same identity women like you always get shoved into?" "Women like you." Those three words hung heavily, pulsing with implication. Leanne paused. It wasn't long, but it was long enough for the audience to feel it. She tilted her head slightly, eyebrows raised just a touch. "You mean women like me?" she repeated softly. Joy shrugged. "Oh come on, you know what I mean. Southern, traditional, conservative-leaning." Leanne held up her hand with a small, polite gesture. "I don't think you do know what I believe, Joy." The audience applauded that, not loudly, but noticeably. Joy blinked in surprise at the reaction. She pushed forward anyway. "Look, I'm just saying that comedy is evolving. A lot of comedians are taking big risks, breaking boundaries. Don't you feel the need to move beyond your casserole humor just to keep up?" The co-host shifted uncomfortably. One reached for her mug. Another glanced at the floor manager as if silently asking for help. But Joy was fixated, almost energized by the friction. It was the kind of moment she thrived on, poking, prodding, pushing until something cracked open. But Leanne Morgan was not cracking. She sat up straighter, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression calm but steady. When she spoke, her voice was kind, but it had an unmistakable firmness behind it. "Well Joy, let me tell you a little something," she began, her southern drawl warm but precise. "I have raised 3 kids. I have gotten a husband through midlife crises, shoulder surgeries, and the emotional trauma of losing college football games. I have dealt with menopause, hot flashes that could melt steel, and I once did a show in a bar where a man in the front row was drinking beer out of an engine oil can." The audience erupted into laughter. Leanne continued, her voice gaining strength. "I've moved on so many times in life I ought to have frequent flyer miles by now." More laughter, louder this time, more supportive. She leaned ever so slightly toward Joy. "But if you think telling stories about real women with real lives, stories that comfort people, make them laugh, make them feel less alone, is somehow too small for you, well, sweetheart, I think that says more about your point of view than it does about mine." Backstage exploded into chaos the instant Leanne Morgan disappeared through the curtain. Crew members froze mid-step, earpieces crackling as producers scrambled to figure out how to salvage the live broadcast. Assistants hurried around with clipboards, makeup brushes, and tangled wires, but all eyes kept drifting toward the hallway where Leanne had vanished. It was as if a quiet bomb had gone off, no flames, no smoke, but the shockwave was undeniable. A young floor producer, barely old enough to rent a car without a fee, sprinted after Leanne, breathless, his headset bouncing against his cheek. "Leanne, Ms. Morgan, wait, please, hold on." Leanne paused only because she was too polite not to. She turned slowly, her expression calm, her posture straight as a fence post. The sweet, steady drawl she was known for carried no anger, only resolve. "Yes, honey." The producer bent forward, hands on his knees. We need you to come back out," he gasped. "We're live. We still have 2 minutes left in the segment. Joy's still on stage. The cameras are everyone's." Leanne gave him a sympathetic smile that somehow made him look even more panicked. "Darlin', if I go back out there, it'll just give y'all more trouble. I'm not mad, but I'm not gonna sit back down and pretend everything's fine." "But the network, PR, segments, ratings," he stuttered like an overworked engine. "Honey, the ratings'll be fine. Probably better after today." She patted his arm gently. "But I'm not gonna be talked to like that. Not on live television, not anywhere." The producer opened his mouth to argue, but another voice chimed in before he could. "Leanne, can we speak with you?" It was a senior producer, older, steadier, carrying the weight of a dozen seasons of daytime television in her shoulders. She approached with practiced calm, but her eyes were wide with underlying urgency. Leanne gave a soft sigh. "I suppose." While the producers tried to negotiate backstage, the on-stage scene had devolved into a mess the cameras were struggling to hide. Joy Behar sat rigid in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin red line. One hand tapped the table relentlessly, an unconscious staccato of irritation. The co-host beside her swallowed hard before speaking. For those watching at home, it appears Leanne needed to, step away for a moment." The audience murmured. Even the cameras seemed unsure where to point, swaying awkwardly between the empty guest chair and Joy's stiff expression. Joy forced a laugh. "Well, that's a first. People usually walk out on me after the show, not during it." The joke fell flat. The audience didn't laugh. A few even groaned. The co-host to Joy's left tried to rescue the moment. "Joy, maybe we should cut to a break. We have 90 seconds, Joy muttered into her mic. "We can fill 90 seconds. She attempted another joke. It fell just as hard as the first. Backstage, the senior producer gestured Leanne into a quieter hallway, away from the frantic noise. "Leanne, we respect you," she began, words measured carefully. "But walking off on live TV, it's going to be a story. A big one." "It already is," Leanne replied softly. "You can hear it in the audience. You can feel it in the building. But I can't sit there and let someone belittle me. That's not who I am." The producer shifted uncomfortably. Joy is Joy. She pushes people. She challenges them. It's part of the show. "I don't mind being challenged," Leanne said gently. "I mind being disrespected." A brief silence stretched between them. Finally, the producer sighed. She knew she wasn't getting Leanne back on stage. "We'll have to manage the fallout." Leanne nodded. "I trust you'll do a good job with that." As Leanne prepared to leave the hallway, a few stagehands whispered among themselves. "She really left. Joy pushed her too far this time. I can't believe she walked off." Live, Leanne heard all of it, but kept moving with that same steady grace she had walked in with. Inside the studio, the show was spiraling. The director's voice crackled frantically through the host's earpieces. "We need to wrap. End the segment. End the segment now." But Joy wasn't listening. Her pride was wounded, and she wasn't the type to let the wound sit quietly. She leaned toward the camera, trying to reclaim control. For the record, I wasn't crossing any line. I was asking questions. That's what we do here. If someone can't handle, the audience erupted in boos. Real, genuine boos. Joy's eyes widened, stunned. She hadn't expected the crowd to turn on her. Not this fast, not this loudly. One co-host gently placed a hand on Joy's arm.